There we go. I would like to invite a shout out to speak first.
Thank you so much. Thank you for letting us go first. And thank you so much for having us as guests at Neuro Pride. And just want to say huge congratulations on all of the events and all of the work that has gone into Neuro Pride this year. We're really happy to be able to, I suppose, speak a little bit about the intersection of LGBTQ plus identities with the community. And I do want to first acknowledge that LGBTQ plus spaces aren't always welcoming to folks who are neurodivergent in a range of ways, and that's why NeuroPride is so important and so valuable. I know that additional barriers are faced at that intersectional level, especially in healthcare and especially in trans healthcare, where the National Gender Service is completely misrepresenting neurodivergent identities within the trans community in really, truly horrific ways. And I know that that's something that LGBT organizations need to be really, really mindful of in any lobbying or any advocacy work that we do around trans healthcare. It's one of the reasons why we have the worst trans healthcare in the EU is because of the limits and the barriers to access for certain communities or for intersectional communities. I also do want to again mention the fact that unfortunately trans folks, and particularly autistic trans folks, have been completely weaponized by politicians who should know better, and by the far right more generally. This has directly affected and impacted some of Shoutout's work because we work around promoting LGBT inclusion in schools, and because we work around supporting LGBT young people in schools and talking about LGBT identities in schools. We found that especially for autistic LGBT young people, especially trans and non-binary autistic young people, they're less likely to be supported, they're less likely to be believed, and they're less likely to be trusted when it comes to coming out as LGBT plus in school. Neurodivergency is used as an excuse not to believe LGBT young people when they come out or when they decide to transition. There's a really great piece that I love from Ellen Murray, where she's written about the intersection of LGBT identities and neurodivergency, and the idea that neurodivergent people aren't trusted to make the right decisions for themselves. Neurotypical folks make the wrong decisions all of the time, but neurotypical people are given the permission to make those wrong decisions and given the kind of space and the narratives and the support needed to navigate those mistakes. And that support is tailored for neurotypical people. Neurodivergent people also deserve to be trusted to be themselves and supported to navigate mistakes or changes if that's what is needed. But also they need to be given the assumption that they will make the right decision for themselves, as everyone should be. Neurodivergency in the school context is also used as an excuse to deny LGBT young people access to the same sex education, the same sexual health education and resources that their peers will get, because neurodivergent young people aren't seen as entitled to the same level of thorough, honest, and accurate sex ed as neurotypical students. They're not seen as mature enough, they're not seen as wise enough to make those decisions or to navigate that education. And that's not done for their sake. It's not done with their safety or their needs in mind. It's really done because their teachers and their parents aren't confident or trained to support and educate all young people in relationships and sexuality education across a range of needs. This is a problem that we can solve if the will is there and if the resources and the means are there, which I know is a huge question. But the new RSE curriculum is a great curriculum, but it needs to be delivered in a way that's appropriate and inclusive, with full training for teachers and support and resources for parents to make sure the curriculum goes home with those students as well. We also, outside of RSE, need additional work in schools that should be done to make sure that autistic and neurodivergent LGBT young people don't face double levels of bullying and discrimination. Extra work needs to be done to make sure that schools are safe and socially inclusive for all students. This is the responsibility primarily of school staff and of parents and the kind of broader school community, but we at Shoutout are working to ensure that students understand their responsibilities as allies to stand up for, support, and include their peers across a range of identities, across a range of perspectives, and a range of experiences. That's the work that Shoutout does. It's all about making schools safer and more inclusive for all students. And so that's why we're really glad to be able to speak with you here today as part of these Soapbox sessions. We're really grateful to be a part of this evening's conversations, and we hope that we'll be as supportive and inclusive as possible of all LGBT young people through our work in schools. And we hope to be able to continue collaborating with yourselves. And again, just want to say thank you so much. Well done, and best of luck with all the conversations this evening. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Such an important topic. I'm sorry if I did lots of applause and love hearts in the chats, just so you're aware. But I'd like to call on Wexford, the Wexford Pride representative, if they are here. Okay, sorry for a moment. Oh, they are having technical issues. That is completely okay. Pippa, can I call on you then?
Hi, I'm Pippa. So I'm a semi-retired home educating mum, which means I have the huge privilege of being able to engage in voluntary work full time, which means I wear a lot of different hats. And through that, I've been involved in a wide number of avenues for representation. And I thought this was a great chance to share some of those. And so I might touch a little bit on the why of representation, but I really want to focus on the how. Representation, from my perspective, is by its nature political, whether it's grassroots activism, whether it's party political. And I don't advocate any one avenue over another. And in fact, am involved at any possible level I can be, because I believe in leaving no stone unturned. So top of my list, public participation networks. This is hugely not known and potentially very useful for getting our voices heard. A public participation network, there's one in every county, and its role is to engage with community groups. Community groups, in order to join them, need to be voluntary groups. They need to have a democratic structure. And then they pull all of these groups together into what they call the plenary, all of the member groups together, which drives the direction of the PPN. And the PPN's main job is to get voices from those groups onto the decision-making bodies in their county. So it's incredibly powerful. We're talking participative democracy. The PPN's divided into 3 colleges: social inclusion, which most of our work probably would fall under, community and voluntary, and environmental. So that the social inclusion voice and the environmental voice don't just get lost in the bigger community and voluntary issues. And some of the councils subgroups that we might sit on will have a specific environmental seat or a specific social inclusion seat. So it's really powerful. And ironically, what you normally want to do, number 2, grassroots activism, is get your grassroots group together, make sure it's democratic and working well, and join the PPN. You have to be about 6 months old to be able to join. In the meantime, I think you can be an associate member anyway, so still apply. I kind of went a bit backwards with some things. Through the PPN, I got involved with setting up the Sligo Disabled Persons Organisation. And that's a good example of grassroots activism. I would say, if you're looking to do grassroots activism, try to choose groups that are driven by lived experience. So DPOs, disabled persons organisations, as I am, is a DPO. Neuro Pride is a DPO. Neurodiversity Sligo, which I started to try and get those voices coming forward, is a DPO. Basically, it needs to be run by us and for us. Right, so there's the Independent Living Movement of Ireland. There's I've just a new group I'm just involved in, Sligo Inclusive Pride. We're trying to bring all of those intersectional voices together into one place. It's quite new. There's United Against Racism. There's the Rosa, the Feminist Socialist Movement. There's Trans and Intersex Pride Dublin does great advocacy. There's lots of grassroots groups already existing, and if there's not one that meets your soapbox, make one. Use it, use your voice, join the PPN, and use it to do the direct action, which is actually my number 4, but I'm skipping. So direct action, you can do that individually, obviously. You can do letters to the editor, letters to MPs, letters MEPs, letters to TDs, letters to councillors. You could do your own press releases, petitions. You can use your social media campaigns. You can make submissions on things which you might find out about through your PPN or through your local paper. But you can do those things individually, and you can do those things collectively. And when you do all of that and bring it all together and start networking, you can start to see where the intersectional issues are as well, and you can be working together towards things. So for us in Sligo, one of our issues has been the Sligo Greenway. They want to put quite a large group of people wants to put a cycle route over the currently disused railway between, there's a section between Athenry basically and Sligo. But Athenry to Claremorris is likely to be reconstituted as rail. That's nearly guaranteed. And Claremorris to Sligo less so. So people want to put a bike route on it. And of course, the Disabled Persons Organisation needs that train. We need people to be able to get to Galway without having to go through Dublin. Buses are not disabled person friendly. They're not guide dog friendly. So we're fighting for the rail, and this group wants people to drive their cars, stick them on a cycle trail and enjoy the route, which we're arguing is a form of eco-ableism. They're not listening to us. So we are using all of the avenues to bring that change together. And so working with other initiatives is the other thing that's on my list. That was my number 3 that I skipped. Through the PPN, we applied to join the As I Am Autism Friendly Towns scheme. And so joining a scheme that already exists is another form of activism and outreach and representation that's open to us. As I say, leave no stone unturned. And all of these things, with all of these things, we're looking at the social model of disability over the medical model. And I mean, I just did a speech at our trans healthcare protest where I pointed out that depathologizing trans is the same issue again. We don't want this medical model. It's social barriers, it's social limits that are in our way. And that's where our intersectionality comes together. And finally, don't forget party political action. Choose a party you believe in, a party that's not going to put up things you don't agree with. If it's not on the left, think again. Seriously, because you're not going to make a lot of change sitting out there on the right. And once you do, there are supports to help you engage in a political party. Obviously, you have to be a member for a while before you became, say, a representative, but that's a path that's available. And there's a really great organisation here in the Northwest called She School. She stands for See Her Elected. And they will come behind anyone who is a woman who wants to run for council and anyone who wants to support a woman to run for council. So there's another avenue for support. And then over all of that, once you've got your fingers in every pie and you're doing everything and you start to feel activist burnout or autistic burnout, it's really important that we're pulling together. And I would say in Sligo, the DPO, the Disabled Persons Organisation, is the most active group we have. And the reason I think that's true is that we support each other. We back each other up. We don't just have one person doing a job, we have a couple. And what we really need most of all in all of our work is more of us doing less. So that's my big plea is yes, representation matters. Let's get ourselves represented and let's use every means at our disposal to do it.
Thank you so much. I think we can all agree with that. And I really appreciate you taking the time, especially with Sligo Inclusive Pride running at the same time. So I really do appreciate it. Gillian, can I ask that you share Kate Ann's video, please?
Sure. Fingers crossed.
Yep. Kate Ann is one of our contributors here in Neuro Pride, and they also have a YouTube channel, TikTok, all that stuff, at Not So Typical Kate.
Unfortunately, I can't seem to get to the start of this. There we go.
My name is Kate Ann, also known as Not So Typical Kate over on my YouTube channel. I'm here today to talk about representation and the challenges faced by the neurodivergent community. The neurodivergent community faces many challenges often faced by the wider disabled community.
Sorry, Gillian, there is no sound coming through. I don't know if you're getting sound your side.
I am. That might be because I'm muted. I'll unmute and see if that makes any difference. I'm very sorry about that, people. I didn't know. I was getting sound, so I didn't know it wasn't working.
Yeah.
I'll try it again. Will you just let me know if it's working and I'll start
Yeah.
from the start again?
My name is Kate Ann.
Yeah.
Also, not so typical.
Okay, I'll go back to the start.
Hi everyone, my name is Kate Ann, also known as Not So Typical Kate over on my YouTube channel. I'm here today to talk about representation and the challenges faced by the neurodivergent community. The neurodivergent community faces many challenges often faced by the wider disabled community. One challenge is representation and the lack of it. When I think of representation and the importance of it, I think of television, politics, social media, radio, books, sports, hospitals, schools, and workplaces up and down the country. How can we ever be truly represented until we see neurodivergent news presenters, sports stars, politicians, or teachers? How can we ever be truly represented until young neurodivergent people see themselves represented in society, people just like them to look up to? The other challenges we face in the neurodivergent community on a daily basis include employment, healthcare, long waiting lists for a diagnosis, myths and stigma surrounding what it means to be neurodivergent, a one-size-fits-all education system, and a need by society to change us and force us to fit into a world that wasn't built for us. 85% of autistic people are unemployed. Many neurodivergent people have other health conditions and are left waiting years for appointments. Neurotypical people still think of Rain Man and Sheldon Cooper when they hear autistic or neurodivergent and believe we're unsociable and incapable of empathy. Our education system is built for the neurotypical academic, while the neurodivergent students miss out on reaching their full potential and often progressing to university or employment. From a young age, society, schools, parents, and therapists attempt to change us and make us fit in, instead of encouraging us to be who we are and celebrating us. We all know of the inhumane use of ABA in Ireland and further afield. In a time when we see the issue of conversion therapy to the forefront in society, we must remember to continue pushing for a ban on ABA and related therapies, even if at times we feel we are not being heard. So how do we overcome these challenges? Number one, events like these, where our community can come together and share knowledge, experience, and expertise. Number two, challenging the system, not being afraid to speak up, question local representatives, question schools, and question teachers. Number three, tell our stories. We cannot leave it up to medical professionals to teach people what being neurodivergent is. We need to make our lived experience the best way to educate neurotypical people about being neurodivergent. Number four, stick together, check in with each other, help each other with advice on different issues that affect us all at one point or another. We all have knowledge and advice worth sharing. We can all be there to listen to other members of the community. Number five, be seen and be heard. Chat to family and friends about being neurodivergent if you feel you're able to. Support important events within our community, such as the Disability Pride Parade, which took place in Dublin a couple of weeks ago. Number six, follow and support advocates. Share their materials online, resources, posts, or videos with others. Number seven, get involved in the community. Go to meetups or join the online groups where we can all get to know each other. Number eight, Fight against harmful therapies such as ABA, whether it's emailing your local TDs or senators, or sharing resources online, or educating people on why it is so harmful. It's a long fight, but we cannot give up. Finally, look after yourself. Self-care is so important. Thank you everyone for your time. I hope you've enjoyed Neuro Pride 2023 so far. And remember, nothing about us without us.
Amazing. I would like to call Vic Kelly from Wexford Pride.
Hello. Am
Hey.
I audible? Perfect. Hi, I'm Vic Kelly Victor, pronouns they, them, treasurer of Wexford Pride, neurotype OCD and complex PTSD. Which feels a bit like credentializing, but I also want to kind of put it out there and always say that, because that's a big part of representation, is having someone come forward and say that, you know, especially in things like Neuro Pride, to be able to see that there is a whole range of neurotypes coming together, that this isn't just, for example, an autistic or an ADHD event, but a broader representation. Representation is a really interesting one, because we live in a capitalist culture that profits from depictions of the other alongside the mainstream. The capitalist culture of entertainment literally has this entire back catalog of movies and television programs and comic books and books and everything else that are entirely centered on this idea that you have the other as entertainment or as wisdom or as these things. And for example, disability, very popular for Oscars. If you want to do an Oscar-winning movie or a Tony or an Emmy or a Golden Globe or whatever it is, very popular to add some background color, very popular to dispense a life lesson that the neurotypical, able-bodied, hearing, seeing, mainstream people can take on. And queerness is treated in much the same way. You know, the queer Oscar movies, the queer best friends who dispense the best life lessons and help you get dressed. In fact, there was a commentary that there was a period in American cinema where the magical Black person who was so wise, the older Black character who would dispense wisdom to the main character, was suddenly replaced by the sassy best friend who just knew the right thing to say to get the girl through the movie. And there was this kind of transformation from the magical Black person to the magical gay person. And we do the same thing with race, with physical ability, with queerness. We other it and we profit from it. And that's not just within movies and television, of course. We will also see the same thing if you're going to talk about a university which will sort of have one disabled, high-functioning, high-performing student who gets sort of promoted as the look. We are a university that's inclusive, as represented by these one or two students, and we put them to the fore, but we're doing that because we want to profit from it. Or we have this, you know, this great queer organization here at our university, or within our political body, or wherever it is. We keep doing this kind of thing. We use the other for capitalist gain. And I think that is as an othered person, that is one of the hardest things, because in order to use that, they don't use the truth of it, because the truth of it is complicated and uncomfortable and has all of these corners and edges that they're not going to be able to neatly fit into the space they want for it. And so they give us false representation, and they don't give us inclusion. And it's very much about us without us. Representation helps us define ourselves, and bad representation really, really hurts us. Especially those of us who are like marginalized within marginalized communities. I'm a wheelchair user, and wheelchair users are the face of disability in so many ways. I'm also deaf. I wear hearing aids. I'm verbal because I didn't grow up deaf, but I am now, without hearing aids, deaf. Deafness is also kind of to the forefront, not quite, but it's sort of lagging behind wheelchair use. But neurodivergence, being neurospicy, as we call it on TikTok, that is a whole like way back. So it gets the worst representation. Like ace and non-binary and non-binary trans people within the queer community get the worst representation. Like the darkest skinned Black people in the Romani get the worst representation when it comes to race, etc. There's always someone who gets the worst, and that really, really hurts. The reason I keep mentioning queerness and neurodivergence, besides the fact that there's a huge overlap between those two communities, is because I myself am queer, disabled, and neurodivergent, panromantic, polyamorous, asexual, PTSD, OCD, deaf wheelchair user with chronic pain, but I'm also white, settled, Irish, and despite being non-binary, very masculine presenting. So I do have some privileges. I'm not going to, I'm not going to claim I don't. But I struggled with knowing myself because I didn't see myself. I didn't see myself on comedy stages. Last night we had a comedy event thanks to Neuro Pride that put two neurodivergent comedians, I was one of them, up on stage, and people came to myself and to Ian Lynham afterwards and said, never seen someone do that before, so happy to see that. Didn't see myself on Doctor Who, didn't see myself on Blake 7, didn't see myself on Star Trek, didn't see myself on any of the things I watched, didn't see myself on the news, as the previous speaker said, didn't see myself in politics. We need, I will finish because I know I'm run over time now. I didn't know that I could be a deaf wheelchair user with OCD and panromantic and asexual. And I thought I had to pick parts of my identity and deny other parts of my identity to make it work. And until we start demanding and providing complex, intersectional, lead character representation in media, in comedy, on TikTok, on Instagram, in books, in comics, in politics, and everywhere. And until we start holding to account the people who give us crappy, edited, clean representation, we will continue to have generations of people coming up not seeing themselves, not knowing that they are more than a support character, they're there for more than dispensing wisdom, and that they can be the lead character in their own fucking lives. That's it.
Amazing. We have So much love hearts, so many applause going on in the chats. Thank you so much, Vic, for your time today, your time last night, and for Wexford Pride for always being a good supporter of Neuro Pride and for making sure to be as inclusive as possible by reaching out to the likes of Neuro Pride. Thank you so much. Mackie, can I call on you next?
You can call on me next. Hi, everyone. Excellent presentation so far. This has been great. And nice to see people picking up on the word representation and working off of that. And I'm going to do the same. Representation is important. It's important across the board, and we've already seen a few examples of that. What I'm going to talk about is something that doesn't get talked about. In other words, the representation is missing, and it's something which really isn't getting addressed. It's the topic of aging and neurodivergence. There's an intersection there that I know some of us are kind of glancing over the garden wall at and thinking, yeah, but we haven't explored this. So it's something we need to talk about. It's something we need to think about more. And we urgently need to think about and appreciate, I suppose, the impact of that intersection, which is embodied by some of the most vulnerable people within our community. Now, I'm going to just flag up straight up front content warnings, bits and pieces around topics like mortality, dementia, abuse, blah, 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 discrimination. You can probably guess where I'm going to go with this. But also I'd like to just acknowledge that even though I'm going to go and present challenges and ask questions here, which maybe can be hard to think about or hard to take on board, certain cultures and certain communities approach their elders and approach their neurodivergent community members in varying different ways. Some of them are deeply respectful and compassionate. Far too many are not. So what I'm asking you to do is to treat my words as an invitation to discussion and to thought and to exploration, and not as a finger pointing, blame or challenge or anything along those lines. So, neurodivergent people, we know the kinds of obstacles we face in life impact us most strongly in areas that matter the most. Things like our personal connections, our relationships, our education, our employment, things like mobility, our access to public spaces, in particular, our legal rights, and more generally in ways that restrict our ability to access our human rights. Part of the problem in terms of aging is tied into the fact that so much of the discussion that we've had, so much of the narrative, so much of the focus, the academic discourse and so on around neurodivergent topics has been focused in on children and to a lesser extent on teens. We all know how that works. You hit 18, suddenly you don't exist anymore. That's changing slowly, and people are beginning to think about what it means to be a neurodivergent adult. You know, one of the great things about Neuro Pride is that it has been a place for that to be explored in richness and depth. But even then, an awful lot of the focus has tended to be on people who are in their 20s, in their 30s, maybe in their 40s or their 50s. And despite the fact that broadly across our community, we have a pretty horrendous life expectancy, that doesn't mean that we can just disregard people above a certain threshold. Okay, if you have an average life expectancy of 50, that doesn't mean that everyone's gone at the age of 50. It means half the population survive past the age of 50. When we don't hear those voices, part of this is a product of the fact that so much of our community is built around digital communication. And that's something that's more and more and more out of reach the older and older you get, simply because it's technology that younger people have grown up with and older people haven't. That's a challenge, and we need to think about how we deal with that challenge. But when it comes to older people, we face challenges as neurodivergent people. Getting older brings its own challenges as part and parcel of being old. You can face discrimination in the workplace. You can face issues with reduced mobility and access to transport and so on. Increased need for healthcare, a massively important issue. Social isolation, also enormously important. And also more straightforward stuff like loss of family and friends. You know, I mean, this is a fundamental part of getting older. How does that impact on people who are neurodivergent? So when we pursue things like policy changes or improved services and better access or access to housing, income security, things like that, we can't afford to forget those of our neurokin who are in their 60s or in their 70s or in their 80s or beyond. And from my own experience, I have known at least one person who's neurodivergent, multiply neurodivergent, who lived into their 90s. These people do exist, and they are part of our community. They're part of our families a lot of the time. So just to throw a few things out there, imagine how the characteristics of dyspraxia or ADHD or something like auditory processing delay might be misread in an 87-year-old. Or imagine how the impact of losing a life partner for a socially isolated autistic 73-year-old is going to roll out. And think about who is assisting elderly people in an elderly care setting, access things like AAC tools and learning how to use them. Yeah, I mean, fair point here. How does dementia impact or intersect with things like BPD or OCD, for example? I don't know. But these are questions we have to start asking. Association with harmful stereotypes around neurodivergence only compounds those kinds of issues that already exist there for our elders. And as I mentioned, our neurodivergent elders are also less likely to be able to be up to speed, not just on things like digital stuff and technology, but on the things that have been transported through that. Modern understandings of neurodivergence and what it means to be a neurodivergent person, even recognizing that in themselves, they have no role models to have worked off of. They've also had to learn masking and shaming and have ingrained coping and survival strategies, which they've had to make part of who they are just to survive through the 1930s, the 1940s or 50s or 60s and right up to when they wake up this morning, today. And it is our duty as a community to reach out and bring those elder voices into the room, right? To respect their humanity and their rights, just as we respect and expect others to respect our humanity and our rights. And having done that, to then go the next step and get in a room with them and explore with them the ways our movements for change, dominated as they are by younger voices, can acknowledge their humanity and give them the platforms that they deserve and integrate their needs into our policies and our projects. Because if we're not bringing them in, we're leaving them out. Now, I've focused a lot here on negatives and shortfalls, the impairments and the additional challenges that people face and so on. But it's also worth bearing in mind that our elders have so much to offer also, and a lot of more traditional societies, even our own, if you go back not that long, had great respect for our elders for good reason. Our elders exist, and their wisdom and their time are resources that we as a community sorely need, right? Because, you know, hands up anyone who isn't constantly worn ragged. Every pair of hands helps. Diversity, which is at the core of what brings us all together and what we share in commonality, is our what brings us together is our difference. Our diversity is what bonds us. But diversity isn't just horizontal across different communities and different groups and different types. It's vertical as well through time. And nobody should be written off. Until we're all free, none of us are free. And that means people in their 80s and people in their 90s as well. Okay, nobody gets written off. Our theme for this year has been representation, and our elders lack representation, even within our own community. And it's our job to remedy that. So, Neuro Pride for all. Thanks for listening.
Thank you for that amazing talk. I know I said I was not going to be reading out any comments today, but we're slightly before the time, my planned time, and we have people messaging about this saying the first person in the world diagnosed with autism recently died. He was in his 80s, a normal male lifespan. We cannot erase our elders. Another one, in terms of aging and the effects of compound issues, there are a lot of premenopausal women who reflect that their autism seems to be getting worse alongside it, myself included. That's from Pippa. And I am scared that if we don't remember our elders, many of us will be left behind from a numbness. So
yeah, just bear in mind, the time's going to come when we're all the elders.
Yeah.
Right. So model what you want to receive in a few decades' time.
Thank you so much, Mackie. Kira, you're up next.
And hi everyone. My name is Kira. I use she/her pronouns. I am dyslexic, dyspraxic, autistic, and trans. And just to kind of, before I go into things, just give a little bit of introduction to kind of my politics. I'm involved with a small political group called Independent Left, based out of Dublin. That's on the far left. That's kind of all about kind of just environment, trans rights, socialism, all kinds of progressive issues. I'm also involved, obviously, with groups like Neuro Pride, Disabled Power Ireland, Jigsaw, Youth Mental Health. I'm a youth advocate. I'm very passionate about mental health. So representation, and the intersectionality of it all. It's really an important thing for me as someone who, for the past few years, has been involved in political activism. It's so important to recognize that people are not just, one specific set. They're not one just community. They're multiple different communities. They're multiple different, disability, queer, whatever that may be. And it is obviously very important to have that recognized and to platform those communities, and to not just have it be done in a very tokenistic way, because quite sadly, especially for the trans community, for the disabled community, there's little to no representation in politics, and often when it's done in political parties, they're really bad at it. They platform people in a very tokenistic way. There's often one person who they always kind of wheel out, no pun intended there with the disabled community, but that is the thing that's done. This one kind of person who they always go to as the rep, and that kind of misses the intersectionality of communities for disabled people who are, because that person might be a disabled person who is in a wheelchair, who is neurotypical, and who is straight. What about the queer disabled people? What about the neurodivergent disabled communities? What about the migrant and refugees disabled people? It misses out so many people, like queer travelers and so on and so forth. So I want to talk a bit about kind of kind of independent left, and this isn't a promotion that I say, hey, join our group, we're brilliant. But I think it is an approach that I believe in, that I was able to find my political voice in, because for many years I didn't get involved in political activism because I didn't feel like someone like me could be involved, could find a voice, a platform. You know, it was the simple being taken in and just being obviously treated with respect, and my voice was equal to everyone else. That was so important when I joined up. You know, there in the group we have a councillor, John Lyons, who's been a councillor since 2014 on Dublin City Council, so, and has been activist for many years. We have a fella called Conor Costick, who is a writer, an author, very experienced on historian on left-wing activism. So so when I joined up, you know, I'm the newbie, I'm, you know, not as much experience as these people, but I was treated as an equal. I was given the same amount of voice, the same amount of say in things, because ultimately I'm just as important as them, and I have my own lived experiences that I bring to the table that are very vital, that are crucial to understanding and engaging with these topics. You know, that I have experiences as well, and that's so important, and just as important as, you know, qualifications. And not because it's often the thing, you know, not to bash qualifications and pieces of paper, they are important, of course, but having that lived experience of being in the community is also crucial and very important. And how independent left operates is a way I'd like to see more kind of political groups operate, in a way that sort of, first of all, if you want to do like something with us, or, you know, do something for, say, our website, you don't have to join. Just like, you can come to us, have a discussion, and if there's something you're really passionate about, we'll publish it on our website. Because, you know, joining is not a condition for engaging with us. That's not how it works, because often a lot of the politics is a lot of, especially on the left wing, it's kind of this, there's a lot of old school figures who are very experienced, and there is a lot of gatekeeping, unfortunately, I found. You know, an example of this was our engagement with Laura Broxton and NARA, who are the National Animal Rights Association. You know, we brought her in, we had discussions with her, we had Zoom talks with her, we done up articles on the website, and eventually what that led to us doing was us all in independent left agreeing to basically working towards being vegan, every single member, because we had talked with her, we talked with the people who were vegan activists who had the lived experience of being vegans, and we made that decision because we engaged with the community with lived experience. Like how independent left got behind trans pride because of my own lived experience of being a trans person. They allowed me to do up a statement in support and solidarity with that. They allowed me to do up a statement of support and solidarity for the Disabled Power Ireland march as well, because I'm the one with the lived experience, much in the same way as in relation to issues like the war in Ukraine, the people who have the lived experience, or who have the vast experience, because that's a bit more complex. It's very hard to get people, obviously, with the lived experience due to the specific situation of that, to speak on that, but people who have studied it quite immensely to do up statements on that. And I'm trying to remember what my second point was now, you know, the neurodivergent thing, but you know, oh yeah, the importance of also independent left and left wing, and the left wing being open to working with others on the left wing. We don't all have to be in this one big giant umbrella organization to get change or to fight on issues. You know, an independent left is open to working with anyone who, as long as you're obviously not like a bigot or discriminatory, you know, if you're willing, you know, that's the really only kind of condition, is that basic humanity. We're open to working with anyone on any common issues. Like, we obviously engaged with the Ireland for All rally, which had people like Sinn Féin, the Social Democrats, government NGOs who are funded by the government, who we may disagree on certain issues, you know, certain ways of doing things. Oh, we disagree with Sinn Féin on this because Sinn Féin might have, you know, this policy and we would rather do it this way. But ultimately, we both agree, you know, on anti-racism. in terms of Pride and my marching in Pride, because that's the whole thing, you know. Oh well, the Garda march in Pride, and there's issues and complexities around that. And anyone who went to the alternative prides, I fully support your decision. I fully understand your decision, because yeah, it's that makes you reacting in that way and not wanting to march in Pride because it's too corporate is absolutely 100% valid. For me, I think one, it's the safety thing for me. Being in that Pride, I feel a lot safer because I'm in a much more kind of I can't think of the word, but you're much more protected. Like, you're not as much of risk of being harmed, and also it's visual representation. And as someone who was a youth advocate for Jigsaw, I was trying to show and speaking on the main stage of Pride that mental health is for all, is for queer people, absolutely, trans people, disabled people. Everyone should have equal access to mental health, and to show that, because it's important. So it's important to engage on these issues. It's important to be open, be willing to work with people who you disagree with, because you have common issues, you have common humanities, and to not be kind of as rigid. And ultimately, we're all human. We can all kind of get along with each other as well, not be kind of very dogmatic or kind of strict in our belief system, and to be flexible. And I would definitely describe myself for a long time as not even being of a specific ideology, which is kind of a weird thing to do, because I thought I would, I'll take time and I'll figure out what particular part of the left wing I belong to and what thought I belong to, and I still haven't figured that out. And I describe myself as kind of an independent leftist. I kind of just ping pong around the left wing, kind of engaging with anyone and everyone who wants to engage with me on common issues. So yeah, and I'll just end this by saying, kind of talking a bit, kind of just a little bit about what Mackie said and the importance of older people. Kind of thinking of my own granddad, who, looking back, because I've discovered I was autistic recently, probably autistic too, because the way he described when he had a job in England about how he would sort different he worked in a provision providers who provided loads of meats and stuff to the various butchers around London, how he sorted things, how he organized things. Me. So yeah, very much that elder neurodivergent. That's the little cross and chain he gave me on my 21st birthday. Say you always have something to remember me by. And he always said, and something that always stuck with me and always inspires me to fight for what I believe in, is it's better to fight a hard battle for something that you believe in rather than an easy battle for something that you don't. So I know these are meant to be a bit rambly. I did kind of ramble on a bit there at the end, more than I probably should have. But yeah, so that's myself. That's everything. Yeah, so thank you for giving me this platform and opportunity to speak. I'm really honored to be able to have done that. So thank you very much. And thank you to everyone in Neuro Pride who's organised the festival, who's done an absolutely amazing job. And I think they definitely deserve a round of applause as much of any of us, because this wouldn't be possible without the likes of Keir, without Gillian, Joanne, and the many others who have gone and come back again doing this. So yeah.
Thank you, Kira. Thank you for your amazing talk. Just in regards to some comments that came through, not just in relation to several different of the talks. Vic said, regards Mackie's, we frequently get trans kids begging to hear from older trans people just to know that they can survive. It has to be the same with neurodivergent people. The youth need to know that we survive. And then, sorry, Pippa said, the left is too easily split. We need to pull together. And Nicole said, I'm vegan too, and I feel more comfortable with pride groups, especially churches that are affirmative. I'm just letting you know. Next speaking is Christine. And after Christine, I'm going to give a quick five minute break I've received a few comments of people getting a bit tired or needing to use bathroom or whatever. So I'm going to have Christina speak, and then, oh, sorry, Christine speak, and then a quick 5-minute break.
Hi, sorry, I'm just going over here. Hi, my name is Christina Mahoney. Very thank you. Thank you to Neuro Pride for inviting me to speak. I myself, I'm neurodivergent. I have ADHD. I thought I would kind of center my speech kind of on the personal, but also kind of touching on really like issues that are really valid today about being neurodivergent. So compared to a lot of people got diagnosed or gets diagnosed when they're older, or they don't get diagnosed at all, but they self-diagnose, and they know the kind of symptoms that they are going through, and they know that they already have ADHD or autism. So I got diagnosed when I was younger through kind of luck, really. I was adopted, so they first alerted when I said that there's epilepsy, and then that's kind of brought alarm bells to my current parents, and they were like, maybe we need to get her checked out, because obviously with epilepsy you can't just you have to prepare for it. They can't have me with flashing lights or anything like that if I did have a fit. So they knew that they had to do something and find out what exactly do I have, given that they don't have the full medical history of my biological family. But we got a doctor in Wexford, and when he was going through exactly what I was doing, for example, my parents noticed that I was quite hyper and I had lots of energy, and I had no sense of danger because I was like climbing everywhere and going up on the roof and stuff like that. They were kind of like, this has to be checked out. So it wasn't epilepsy that I had, but it was ADHD. And I got my diagnosis quite early in 2005. So therefore, I was able to get supports. I was able to get medication like Concerta and Ritalin. A lot of my peers don't have that luck because of the healthcare system that we have. People are on waiting lists, and it's quite expensive to get a diagnosis. So when other people who are going through CAMS, for example, the Child Adolescent Mental Health Services, and they were saying that they're in the mental health services, but they don't have a diagnosis to receive supports, it got me really angry that I was lucky and they're not. So in a way that, although I'm a minority, I'm still privileged that I had that early diagnosis. In school, it was quite terrible because not a lot of people knew about ADHD or neurodivergence in general, or autism. So I didn't get an SNA, which is special need assistant, until I was second year, I believe. But I went from an Educate Together school where there was a lot of diversity, where everyone was active and people didn't care if you had ADHD. They didn't even know what it was. Made so welcome because everybody did the same. And then I went to a religious school, all-girls school, and the energy there just was non-existent. Nobody was really that hyper apart from myself. So the school kind of dismissed me as like a class clown, and kind of compared me to the boys' school, because everyone was a class clown in the boys' school. And historically, ADHD was known as a boys' disorder, that only males could have ADHD. But I'm female, I have ADHD, and a lot of my friends do as well. And a lot of their concerns are ignored because they're female. So like one of my friends is really smart. She also did law with myself. And when she said she had ADHD, people didn't believe her because, she was smart. She was a straight A student. And it made me offended, because I was like, what are you saying, that we have to have fail our school to, you know, to be known as ADHD. So, you know, I said, when I was told that people with ADHD don't amount to anything, and, you know, they don't have the jobs that you would want, like, for example, being a lawyer or a doctor. And usually they told me that usually ADHD people tend to live a life of criminality. I was like, there's no way I want that to be the stereotype of ADHD. So the way I lived my life, I decided to challenge myself. So with ADHD, you sometimes have difficulty kind of multitasking everything, but I kind of had to multitask to, you know, to beat this stereotype that's being around. And the fact that people in my school, they treated people who were in the special needs school that was right just like 5 minutes away from us, they, to my face, they said, "Oh, are you talking about the handicap school?" And they said that to me, who happens to have a disability themselves. And even when we were younger, the word, you know, using ADHD or autism and disability just was non-existent, because people didn't, like the government and teachers didn't see ADHD as a disability. And I remember recently that they were calling ADHD an altered ability. The government, that was the new definition of ADHD, and a lot of people were getting worried that if you call it an altered ability, it means that they won't get, ADHD won't get disability status, and that means people could be taken off their medication and stuff like this. So it's really, the language around ADHD needs to improve, because it is a disability. And I don't care what other people think, it is a disability. And I think one of the speakers mentioned that when it comes to disability, it's always the wheelchair user that people use as the image of disability. But that's not the case. Neurodivergent is a disability, you know, it's in the disability umbrella. And I remember when I was actually the VP for Diversity and Inclusion in DCU, and I was trying to make graphics for our disability week, you know, I was having difficulty because I didn't want it just to be a wheelchair user as the image. And luckily on Canva, they actually had neurodivergent you know, people, the emojis and stuff like this. And I was like so happy that they actually recognize neurodivergent people in the Canva settings, because it made my life easier to make graphics that represented everyone. And that's kind of what this talk is about. It's about representation. A lot of speakers already touched about it, that they never saw somebody like themselves growing up. And that was the same. And I think if I did see a TV show that represented me, I might have felt a bit better, knowing that I'm on my own. I'm not on my own, because that's how I felt growing up in school, that I was on my own, because everyone kind of, singled me out in school because of my class clown behavior and stuff like that. Like when you do see a lot of shows today, Atypical is one of them, where the main character is a person on the spectrum, on the autistic spectrum. And I did research the actor, and the actor isn't neurodivergent themselves. I do think they did a good job, but I feel like it would have been better if somebody who was neurodivergent actually played that character in Atypical, because obviously I want the filmmakers to actually do research and realize, when people do have outbreaks and when people want to be alone and stuff like that, it's a real thing. And I feel like if we had somebody who was part of that community, I would feel better watching it than somebody who's neurotypical playing it. And that's no offense to the actor, but we do need representation. And there is actors out there and there is actresses out there who are part of the community, and a lot of people are actually coming forward now and revealing that they have an autistic diagnosis or an ADHD diagnosis. And these are celebrities who are bringing light to the issue. And we need more of that, because a lot of people are getting their information from TikTok, I see, and there's nothing wrong with scrolling through TikTok and finding out what kind of a disability you have. But sometimes the information that is put out there isn't all true. So it's great to have somebody who has that lived experience who is telling you these are the symptoms of ADHD or these are the symptoms of autism. Because like myself, I found out about rejection sensitivity disorder through TikTok. And I thought that was really good because it actually brought up kind of what I go through, and when a friendship ends, is how hard it is for me. I always thought that was normal, that it's you know, that you're going to feel bad and it's going to kind of be in your head for ages once a friendship ends. But I realized through that TikTok video that it was rejection sensitivity disorder, and I went on and researched, and I realized that was what I had. So I feel like if we had more people on TV who are professionals who have that lived experience telling people, it'd be better information, because as I mentioned before, not all the information is true, and sometimes you have people there who, you know, they're not on it for the right intentions. Sometimes people make money from viral videos, and sometimes they're not from that community either. So we need a community, and I want to applaud Disability Pride Ireland for their first Pride Parade in Dublin, and I felt it was great to have a community together, and it really did inspire me. And I really want more people involved, because I noticed when we were marching through the streets, you know, we had a few people cheering us on, but compared to when you're in a Pride Parade, you know, a lot of people will be cheering you throughout the whole parade, and a lot of people didn't know why we were marching. So that's why we need more representation out there, so people know why we're marching, because everyone should be in support of disability. And the COVID pandemic really showed how the government treats people with disability, only giving them 220, I think it's 220 for disability allowance. And yet they said that it's 360 or 50, I keep forgetting, that they gave to people during the COVID pandemic, because that's what you need to live on. So it really shows you how much people don't care, and why we need people, as the previous speaker spoke about politics, why we need people like ourselves in politics. Because if people like ourselves were in politics, they would actually make laws that represent us, and not figures that they come up on the top of their head and think that, oh, a disabled person can live with that, even though we have medication and we need disability aids and stuff like this. So yeah, I think we need a lot of more representation, and those who are involved in politics, please consider going for maybe a politician or a councillor position. I'm not into being a politician myself, but it'd be great if anyone is in this room who wants to go into politics actually does and makes change for ourselves. So thank you so much for speaking. I'm sorry I rambled on. I did have something prepared, but I decided to go off script. But thank you so much, Ciara, for inviting me.
Thank you so much. Lots of love hearts, all that jazz going on. A few comments came in for you, and that was ADHD from Nicole. ADHD can be an asset in academics. Hyperbrain because it's taken in so much. Vic says the stereotypes, they kill our community's chances. Saying an ADHDer is destined for a life of criminality is no different to any other bigoted statement about a marginalized person. Neurodivergence should be included in the social model of disability, recognized and included. Nicole said most screen representations are that of white males. And Vic said ADHD and rejection sensitivity go hand in hand, and we need to talk more about that and how to manage it. And another comment came in, and I have to agree with it. It's very good talk, really informative. And then from Nicole, it was not rambling, it was very to the point. Charlie said, I did my whole final year project in my undergrad on a comparison of self-representation self-representation versus media representation of autism, where I compared Atypical to a lot of neurodivergent activists, especially Chloe Hayden, who is now an actress who played of the first self-represented autistic character. She even won an Australian Actors Award and bet Rebel Wilson and Ilsa Fisher. Amazing. Thank you all for all the comments. And now, if we'd like to return to our regular schedules, Danielle, are you about at the moment?
I am.
Perfect. Would you like to go for it?
Yeah. Thank you so much for having us. My name is Danielle, she, her pronouns. I'm queer, disabled, a survivor, hella cute. And alongside my other neurodivergences, I live as part of a dissociative plural system. That means that there are 3 other people who call my body home with their own desires, memories, sense of self, and names. There's me, there's Danny, there's Emily, and there's Lily. Together, we call ourselves Danny, Emma, Lily. Emily came up with it, don't blame me. We trade places and sometimes share space, and we try to love each other and cooperate. Sometimes this breaks down and it's hard, but it's been useful to see the others not as problems to overcome, but people who need things. Often all they need is to be loved and to be seen. I do too. We all need to be seen because it tells us that we belong in some way. We've been like this as much of our life as we can remember, and so often all we've ever seen of people like us is that we are villains or stereotypes of crazy. We are shown as creepy, as terrifying, as devious, as problems. How could we see ourselves as anything but that when that's all anyone ever seems to see of us? The first positive representation of a person openly living with the idea we can recall was a show called United States of Tara. It was about a family trying to figure out how to live with Tara's alters and figure out how to help them. It wasn't perfect, but it gave the main characters agency and empathy in a way we'd never seen before. It was generally still treated as a problem, but they weren't villainized. It was hard to acknowledge at the time that this was something we were living with, but it gave us a starting point to understanding ourselves. We're often grasping at straws for representation, any kind at all, when it comes to living as a plural, let alone a plural system who are accepted and loved by those around them. We're incredibly lucky that our coming out as plural has gone so well, and even if not everyone understands what it's like, they still know we're their friends. In making comics about our experiences, we try to let other plurals see that acceptance is possible and that they might not have to hide their existence forever. We feel such pure joy when other plurals rebug a comic and say they feel seen. We got to feel seen by other creators and organizers talking about being plural, such as in Meg John Barker's scenes about plurality on their Rewriting the Rules site, where they lay out how people can connect with their plurality, plurality, and to whatever extent they do feel connected with it. They didn't perfectly describe our experience, but seeing how somebody else made a model for themselves helped us in making our own. We have more recently had representation on shows like Doom Patrol and Moon Knight, and while it's been long quite common to see plurals with superpowers, it has been rare for us to be shown as heroes. Being plural isn't a superpower, and it would be nice if it weren't always a plot device, but at least we are getting the chance to be something other than villains, even if we are still often having to wear like the hero and villain masks at the same time. because the writer sat there being clever. We're people, not monsters, not broken. The way we exist should get to be something other than drama for the real heroes to face. Maybe one day we'll have people who openly have experiences of plurality in their real lives get to actually play such characters in fiction too. But most important is the works we can create for each other. We're never going to hate ourselves into being better. So having demonstrations in our fiction of how worthy of love we are is really important. My favorite recent plural creation was a singlet vest that says not a singlet, and it still makes me giggle. Thank you so much for listening, and thank you so much to Neuro Pride Ireland for having us.
Thank you. Loads of claps and love hearts. Thank you so much. Danielle has very kindly offered their experience there a few months ago when we were doing stuff around D&D Pride and their her comics, and I really appreciate, like, with all our contributors, how much. So comments from Louise. I just want to say thanks to all the organizers and everyone who was brave enough to speak and share their thoughts with everyone. We've been at most of the meetups this year, and although I'm mostly hidden with my camera off and not much to say, I've loved every minute, so thank you so much. Thank you, Louise. Thank you for being here. And that's, I love that about Neuro Pride. I love that this is a space that it doesn't matter if your camera's on or off, your mic is on or off. I have hosted events on mute days where I just had to type into the chat box for everyone, and I love that this is a space for us. But back to the praise of Danielle. Pippa said everyone deserves to be seen and heard and validated. Jillian said, honestly feel so privileged to be getting this firsthand lived voice. I am so thankful to you all for sharing. Mackie said, fabulous presentation, love to Danielle and the rest of her inner team. Thank you. And Jillian, can I hand it over to you?
Yeah, would you like me to show the video first or to read?
Yes, video first. Go for it.
Something off my chest. Rowan Daly. Lay down. 20 years in the system misdiagnosed. 20 years in the system. Use meds and those. Trying my best. Get 2 things off my chest. Trying not to fall down and be trampled by the rest. You chose the time to try to put me down. But I'm trying my best just to not shut the fuck down. Trauma unhealed and hearts unpure. Thinking what the fuck is wrong with her. If you think you will win, you underestimate me. Whatever you think, whatever you see, your opinions are yours. Nothing to do with me. 20 years in the system misdiagnosed. 20 years in the system. These meds and those. But no one has listened. Or put you some slack. I hope you had a laugh. Now take a step back. Your opinions are yours. Nothing to do with me. As the old Irish saying goes. Ask Maggie.
Yeah, so now I'm going to read out a piece from Rowan. Now this is in first person, so for those, I'm not Rowan, I'm Gillian, but I'm just going to read this piece out on their behalf. Hello, my name is Roan Daly. I use they, them pronouns. I was due to speak with you today, but I'm far too unwell to do so, unfortunately. I live with chronic illness, and when you live with a dynamic disability, what you can do day to day varies greatly. On top of that, I'm also a non-binary person in Ireland. That aspect of my healthcare is not currently being addressed. There is no pathway to care for me that I can see, and I'm concerned for the young people coming up behind me. The current gender services in Ireland, including Loughlinstown, have a reputation for not recognising or supporting people who live outside the gender binary life experience. They do not recognise non-binary people, and the Gender Recognition Act, in fact, does little to support our needs from what I can see. I am privileged to have worked in some environments that are more progressive than the current Irish legal requirements. The National Gender Service has extremely long waiting lists, and from what I understand, folks who fall off in their binary transition, some who've had to lie or admit truth to get the support they need to begin with are considered to have detransitioned, which may not always be the case. They could just be falling through the cracks like me. Any of the services the National Gender Service offers often comes with extremely invasive questions that are potentially harmful and invasive, which is why I've been reluctant to self-advocate, because I might as well speak into the void. We are doing a really massive disservice to both transgender, genderqueer, non-binary, and in fact, all people who need to access these types of services, especially when we have to fight so hard to even get through the doors. And I'm not even a wheelchair user at this time. We need to invest in services, people's spaces and access to all services who need it, and reflect on our morals and ethics to figure out how we got to this place and how to come back from it. It is my personal opinion as a service user waiting in the line that we need to decentralise the gender services in Ireland, as they are not functioning. However, it needs to be wound down and phased out, while local affordable healthcare and appropriate levels of hormone treatment available from informed local general practitioners. Prescribed and monitored as needed, rather than continuing to outsource the problem to Northern Ireland or the UK, or even further. Let's not have a repeat of Repeal the 8th. It was a lot of work. People of all minorities under the rainbow are already fighting so much just to stay strong. Why are trans people segregated from hormonal treatment when the majority of others in the medical sector to begin with? We need to assess and create a better system than we have today. So my situation is this. I've experienced gender dysphoria, not having my gender legally recognised by the state, on top of my dynamic disability, and not to mention long COVID. I'm running out of time, much like many others. Like me, 20 years or more misdiagnosed in the mental health service lines. Thank you for your time.
Amazing. Thank you, Julian, for reading it. More importantly, thank you, Ro, for sending it in and sharing it with us. An anonymous comment says, poem is so powerful. I was on the verge of tears until the end when you gave me a much needed giggle, which is like, it's fair. And then we have Becky next.
Hey, can you hear me?
Yep.
Cool. Sometimes there's technical issues, so that's good. Yeah, so basically I'm Becky. I'm in my first year of training to be a counselor and a psychotherapist. I'm autistic, I'm ADHD, I have complex PTSD, and I'm chronically ill. I'm also queer, so I'm at a few intersections, I suppose. Yeah, basically today I just wanted to talk about why we need more neurodivergent therapists. This is something I feel quite strongly about, and the reason why I want to train to be a therapist is so that I can basically serve our community and you know, be there for our community and stuff. So yeah, I have 7 reasons written down, and I just want to preface it by saying that I'll be talking a little bit about mental health stuff, and there will be a mention of suicide just briefly. So yeah, I'll get into it. I'll try not to ramble. So why we need more neurodivergent therapists? Because due to the stresses of being neurodivergent in a neurotypical world, we have much higher rates of depression, anxiety, and PTSD and addiction among our community. Because being neurodivergent means we come up against unique challenges that neurotypicals don't. Empathy is an important part of the therapeutic relationship. Neurodivergent clients need to be seen and understood on a deep level with unconditional positive regard. And because of late identification as well, we're now witnessing a boom of folks realizing that they're neurodivergent. But after lifetimes of masking and not knowing, these folks may need a therapist with a deep understanding of what it means to be neurodivergent to help them navigate post-identification life. And because we need people who are going to understand what it's like to be neurodivergent in a therapy room, like the comfort in the therapy room is of utmost importance. So the neurodivergent therapist will know how to have a more kind of neurodivergent experience where stimming, movement, and even snacking is all very much okay. We need more neurodivergent therapists because of the intersections many of us live at. We need people who have lived experience, who know what it's like to be LGBTQIA+, maybe to be chronically ill, maybe to be mentally ill. That lived experience is really, really valuable. We need more neurodivergent therapists because our suicide rate is so high. I think it's something like neurodivergent people are 9 times more likely to die by suicide than their neurotypical peers, which is just absolutely shocking. It's something quite high like that, 8 or 9 times. I can't remember the exact figure, but it's shocking. Our community needs deep care and healing. Neurodivergent therapists are uniquely placed to start and aid this healing work among our community. And the last one is to do with communication. Neurodivergent people are better at communicating with other neurodivergent people. Contrary to popular belief, we don't lack social skills whatsoever. You might have heard of the double empathy problem. And this wouldn't really be much of an issue among a neurodivergent therapist and a neurodivergent client. Also, the type of communication that is offered in the therapy room, the nonviolent communication, that's trauma informed. It's so important I think for everyone to learn, but it also might be one of the first times that the neurodivergent person has experienced that as well, which is sad but true. Yeah, so I feel like that's pretty much it. I really feel like we need more neurodivergent therapists in general. And I could probably go on about it more, but that's the main stuff. So thank you for listening, and thank you for a lovely Neuro Pride, and yay. Bye.
Thank you so much, Becky. Few comments here, but I will say firstly myself, I really appreciate any neurodivergent that goes into jobs like that. Everybody, I think, has heard me rave about good therapists at this stage. They change, they make what can feel impossible feel bearable, I think, at very least. Comments. My third born has just graduated with psychotherapy and youth studies honors year next, one of the national associations that came up when they were searching for which one to join. Offers training for its members in autism informed therapy I forget which one. That's from Pippa. Kira said, as someone who is a mental health advocate with Jigsaw Youth Mental Health, having more people in Jigsaw with lived experience and making the service is so important to me. And Carla says, I 100% agree, Becky. I am neurodivergent and heading into my final year training as a psychotherapist. I am so grateful to be able to help our community. Amazing. Thank you so much to you for talking, you for pursuing this profession, and to all the neurodivergent mental health professionals out there and soon to be. Next we have amazing drag performer Victor Complex.
Hi, everybody. Gee, oh, hang on a second. I need to move. Ooh. Yeah. Give me one moment.
Of course.
I am in between Galway Pride events, and I'm currently in the corner of Orphan Gale. So give me one moment.
You're okay. Oh, considering we're mentioning Galway Pride, just in case any of you didn't know, on Wednesday we are helping to host their.
Here it's Thursday.
Sorry, Thursday. Sorry, Thursday.
Yep.
Oh, great! That means a break tomorrow. On Thursday, we are helping to host their disability space on Zoom with Disability Power Ireland.
Just in case you turned up tomorrow, I'll be like, you're not meant to be here. Yeah.
Can everyone hear me okay? I've just moved to a slightly different location.
Yep.
Awesome. Okay, so hi, my name is Victor Complex. I am a drag king, and my pronouns are he or they in drag, they, them out of drag. Some of you may know me out my outside drag name, my government name, as I like to call it, Sharon Nolan. I do a lot of activism and a lot of different things. But one thing I wanted to highlight in particular, because even as a neurodivergent performer, is the huge intersection between drag performers and neurodivergent. Because I think when people think of like a stereotypical drag performer, they might think that like, oh, that's a big like partying person. There's like, it's like only for a certain type of person. But honestly, like the amount of different neurodivergent performers that I know, even from the most mainstream of drag nights to the most niche and alternative, like there's so many of us. And I know when I first started doing drag, like I was so confused, or not confused, sorry. I was so anxious and so nervous that I was like, oh no, this is going to be really strange. Like sometimes I need to stay backstage while I'm waiting. Like I need to take breaks. I bring my loops when I'm going around. And I was like, this is going to make me like the odd person out backstage. And if 100% wasn't the case, like obviously there is lots of neurodivergent people who enjoy sensory seeking situations and nights out where you can dance, because let's be real, dancing is just socially acceptable stimming. Like, and there's just, I was so welcomed and so embraced, and immediately had people be like, oh yeah, I have ADHD, oh, I have autism, I have mental health issues, I have all of these different things. And I think similar to a lot of other art forms, it is for disabled community members that often are looking for ways to kind of express outside of the kind of capitalist normative binary of what people do for jobs. So there's a huge intersection of all kinds of disability, different drag, and it's just been a really wonderful time. There's currently an art exhibition going on that's just closing up for the day. So, and there's a drag workshop happening in another room. So apologies again for a little bits of noise backstage. But yes, like when it comes to different drag shows, like there is like drag shows across the country that do offer quiet spaces. Like I know Pop and Pasties and Disgraceful Cabaret, they're two shows I perform with on a regular basis. They both offer quiet spaces. They will do any kind of like warnings if there's going to be any changes to the lights. They'll accommodate things both for performers and for attendees, because it's such a fun and creative outlet. Like why should the neurotypicals have it to themselves? And again, because I don't know, like my own reservations from being a performer. I was so anxious going into these spaces going, am I going to be the odd one out? When really, I really wasn't. And I've just been really embracing going into drag. It's been, you know, my favorite hyperfixation right now. Like I'm over a year doing drag. It's been fantastic. And can I say, you basically just get to embrace your special interests and move with them. Like one of my main special interests is the band My Chemical Romance. I do a lot of My Chemical Romance numbers, a lot of Jared Way cosplaying. I get to do like kind of little theatrical things. I get to do tongue-in-cheek kind of things. I recently turned my rollator into a submarine that I was piloting with the controller at a show I was at last month, and that act went down an absolute storm. Like people are just so excited to see people come in with a different approach, and it's just been really, really wonderful. So for anyone who feels like, I don't know, their neurodivergency could be a barrier to being in drag, I just want to assure you that 100% not the case. To embrace the weird, embrace like making it accessible for yourself and doing drag the way you want to do it, because all forms of drag are valid. So that's me. So also come to all the Galway Pride things. It's going to be amazing, and book more drag kings. I think that's everything I need to say, but thanks so much for having me, and absolutely delighted to support another Neuro Pride, and you're doing fantastic work.
Amazing. Thank you so much. We are friends, and it has been so lovely getting to see your performances online and just seeing them evolve. And several of our like mutual friend groups have gotten into drag in the last year or so, and it's been so inspiring looking at everybody live their best life. But a few comments here. Oh god, sorry, they jumped on me. Vic says neuro bland people don't deserve the richness of neuro spicy drag.
I'm obsessed with that. Yes, I might borrow that phrase. Thank you.
Mackie says, yes, Victor, we are the different approach. Love the way you are embodying that. And Kira said, I'm thinking of doing drag, getting involved really as a way of exploring my feminine side as a trans woman, and to hear the positive representation in drag and to hear of the accessibility of it is amazing. I have to agree. As somebody that has a drag act full on in their head, I love seeing it happen.
Oh yeah,
and give strength to the rest of us.
100, and even again, like as a trans masculine person, like I love playing up my masculinity so much with drag, but also doing it in a very androgynous-y, David Bowie, Jared Way kind of way, because you know there isn't one way to be masculine, so it's all good.
We've gotten a recommendation in the chat for people to look up Drag Syndrome, which is drag artists with Down syndromes in the UK. Awesome. Thank you.
Their Instagram is amazing. I second that recommendation.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Good luck with Galway Pride and good luck with your performances. Thank you. And I will jump back to my lovely list. And I shouldn't have actually, because I know exactly who is talking next. Next is Aoife on behalf of Neuro Pride Ireland.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. Well, I'm part of this wonderful organization now, this wonderful disabled persons organization, and what a deadly year it's been being involved. And yeah, so I think a big thing for all of us, for the founders of Neuro Pride, and then for myself and other people who have gotten involved since its inception, is obviously we're talking about representation now, and how we as a community are starting to become that representation, and how that's really awesome, and how communities like so intrinsically important to like neurotypicals, and we know that, and we've seen that through history, but we've never kind of seen, oh, I'm breaking up a bit there. it has a habit of doing this. But I think that the cool thing is that we're finding our own way to be representations for our community and also build community differently, not differently, but kind of in the way, as Victor just said there, that because we kind of we navigate the world differently with different experiences and stuff, naturally the way we're going to build community and we're going to represent our community is slightly different to what neurotypical people have been doing. And that's obviously, we've largely, I know, like even in like activist spaces, or even when you look back on like different spaces throughout history, we kind of get one kind of representation of what community is supposed to look like. And I think going forward, we're kind of showing the diversity of like, you know, maybe you hang out with your friends, you don't have to speak to them for like 2 hours straight. Maybe you can just sit together and do your own thing and just kind of body double or just parallel play and stuff like that, and how that's really, really awesome. And kind of creating that space to be ourselves, and also build strong relationships and have great relationships, but just in a way that's kind of more on our terms and suits us more. So I think that's one of my favorite things about being part of Neuro Pride, is just being part of a really cool community of people, and we're all kind of living our lives authentically. We're learning to treat ourselves with the grace and respect that perhaps we mightn't have done prior to discovering that we're neurodivergent, prior to learning about ourselves, and that's really, really cool. And I think personally, I suppose pondering more on the idea of representation, which is what we're discussing here, is I know we've talked a lot about media, and that's really, really important, but I think even like each of us being like representation, like on a day-to-day basis of neurodivergent people moving through the world, moving through Irish society. And I know for a fact, if it weren't for my sister having an autistic friend and kind of going, oh, hang on, this person does all of these things and Aoife does all of these things, that was the way we figured out that I'm neurodivergent. And I know subsequently, since going on my own path and becoming confident in my identity and being a proudly out neurodivergent person, several of my friends have since come to discover that they're also neurodivergent, because, and I've had a couple of people, like the few people I'm thinking about and I'm talking about, women. I don't personally identify as a woman anymore, but like as like femme people moving through the world, often our neurodivergence gets missed. And obviously there's other factors, if you're part of a racial minority or religious minority and so on and so forth, it gets even more challenging to discover your neurodivergence. But I've had these people actually say, Aoife, you were contrary to all the stereotypes of autism, which is my form of neurodivergence, and kind of going, but like Aoife like does all of these things, but also has all of these challenges, but also like experiences, and they think of things this way, and kind of realizing that autism isn't the stereotype of the young boys having a meltdown, and it does look differently across gender, across age demographic, across race. So I know for a fact that I have been representation in other people's lives that have helped them discover that they also are neurodivergent, because again, we're all doing our thing, but we're doing it differently to what the media shows, to what we've been told by healthcare professionals, to all of these things. So I think that's really important to kind of reflect, and I think we should really be proud of ourselves, because it's not easy existing in this world when you're in any way deviating from the norm, and just, yeah, so being physical representation is really cool, not to be entirely self-centered about it, but I know like an autistic person in real life meant that I figured out I was autistic, and because I was proud and spoke about it, another person got diagnosed or figured it out, and that's really cool. And then I suppose I if you've seen me at like the Disability Power march and stuff, I speak a lot on like kind of work, experiencing the workplace and capitalism and stuff like that, because unfortunately I think like a lot of us, I'm in the position where I have to work, and like many of us, I'm the first out neurodivergent person in that space. Sorry, I'm frozen again. I'm the first kind of out neurodivergent person in that space who's asked for accommodations and said, no, I am entitled to be treated with respect. I'm entitled to accommodations. I'm entitled to work slightly differently because this is the way my brain works. And while that is really scary, and sometimes we do face discrimination, like I've experienced a little bit of it, and discomfort, and being slightly villainized, or even bullying and stuff, and there are like scary aspects to it, I think it is really cool that people coming in the door after me who may have other forms of neurodivergence, who may be disabled in other ways, might have a tiny bit of an easier time because someone's already done it. Because my boss told me that we've never done this before. And it's really nice that that won't be said to the next person. Yeah, sorry, I froze again there. I think, yeah, and I suppose kind of not the last thing, but like another thing that's really important to me, obviously I'm a trans non-binary person, but as I said, there's other forms of marginalization, such as being a person of color, being a woman, being from kind of being working class, and all of these different things do come into play when it comes to being represented as neurodivergent, but also accessing any type of services. We know there are not a lot, but in terms of accessing any type of services in this country, when people are multiply marginalized, and I know a lot of us here have experienced multiple forms of neurodivergence, plus often physical and otherwise disabilities. And I think to remember that when we're talking about representation, there's other people. I'm a white person who passes as a woman, and as Vic said, on their experiences, like, yeah, we have a certain amount of privilege due to that, but to remember our kind of our siblings in arms who are kind of having a tough time, who it may not be safe to be out as neurodivergent in the same way it might not be safe to be out as queer or trans, and stuff like that. So yeah, kind of solidarity and standing with all of the people who can't talk about it right now, who aren't comfortable, who aren't safe. And I know Keir has touched on in the past kind of our mad siblings and the stigma that they face, and just kind of all the love to them. And we are taking steps as a community to represent not just ourselves, but the people who come after us, and obviously the thousands of people who've come before us. So yeah, just thank you so much everyone for coming, for being a part of Neuro Pride. This community has led me to make so many friends and connections, and also be able to be really proud of myself and my community. And not to be completely gooey about it, I do love you all, and it's so cool being part of such a deadly community of deadly people. So yeah, I'm gonna leave it there. But thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you so much, Aoife, and thank you, Aoife, for being the newest member of our organizing team this year. Few comments. Vic says, if we break a hole in the corporate cultural wall, another neurodivergent might be able to fit through behind us, and then the hole will keep getting bigger. I love that so much.
That's awesome.
Kira said, I forgot at the end of my speech to thank Aoife for all the wonderful work he does for Neuro Pride and DPI, and being an awesome activist and representation of the community. And I also forgot to mention, as everyone has said, capitalism is really bad. We need a radical change. As here, I will say, there has been very few, if any, meetups that have happened over the past 6 days where somebody has not talked about dismantling the system or just burning it all to the ground. So Vic said we couldn't provide proper inclusivity prize in Wexford without you. Thank you, Neuro Pride. Okay, perfect. Awesome. I am going to throw it back to Gillian.
Yeah, so I'm again speaking on behalf of somebody else, not as myself. I know this might be confusing for some people, but you keep on hearing my voice and somebody else's words. But this is a submission that we got from another person who is helping mod our Facebook group and has been helping out behind the scenes. Their name is Sarah Duane, and they are on social media as a life through my lens. I want to say life through my lens. And they have been doing a lot of advocacy work and producing a lot of content on social media to try and help change the narrative around neurodivergency and kind of bridging that gap between, you know, parents, caregivers and professionals and our community. Also just to say before I read this that Sarah, we are making, Sarah submitted a piece on polyvagal theory that I mentioned the other night, and it'll be going live today if people are interested in that. It's a really good piece. It's really, really good breakdown of what it is and why it's important. So, The Power of Representation by Sarah Duane. I'm probably mispronouncing your name, sorry, Sarah. For our neurodivergent community, representation matters. It goes beyond being seen and heard. It is about breaking barriers, challenging stereotypes, and paving the way for a more inclusive society. In this short piece, I'll share why representation is important across various aspects of life, from education and healthcare to film and media. As a multiply neurodivergent disability advocate, I have witnessed how inadequate representation negatively impacts our self-esteem, confidence, and our sense of belonging. This really needs to change. Representation is the key that unlocks the door to inclusivity, diversity, and social equality. It is the embodiment of the age-old advocacy quote, "Nothing about us without us." The absence of representation perpetuates marginalization and exclusion, while its presence sparks acceptance, empathy, and change. Representation reshapes the narratives and dismantles societal barriers that have long hindered progress and understanding. For me, representation means the opportunity to stand on equal ground where my voice is valued and my experiences are understood and respected. It means being more than just a token inclusion, but an active participant in shaping policies, spaces, and opportunities. It signifies a world that acknowledges the richness of human diversity and seeks to foster an environment where everyone is seen, appreciated, and celebrated for who they are. Representation in educational systems is paramount because it helps to create an inclusive learning environment. Representation in curricula and textbooks can debunk stereotypes, broaden perspectives, and enhance understanding among students about the diverse world we live in. Representation in health and care systems is vital for ensuring quality and empathetic healthcare services. When medical professionals and caregivers understand our unique experiences, it leads to better care and treatment outcomes. For example, having an autistic therapist can be literally life-changing and life-saving for many autistic individuals. Representation in film and media is a powerful tool for shaping public perceptions and attitudes. When neurodivergent individuals are portrayed authentically and portrayed by neurodivergent actors, it sheds light on our true experiences, breaking down stereotypes and promoting inclusivity. Authentic representation not only benefits neurodivergent audiences, but also creates more engaging and meaningful storytelling for all. Representation is an essential step toward creating a world that embraces neurodiversity. That is, embracing the fact that there's no single or normal brain. My neurodivergent way of existing is valid, and I do not need to conform to society's notion of normal, especially considering the term normal is a social construct and society itself isn't particularly designed with neurominorities in mind. Neurodivergence is an intrinsic part of the human experience. We have the right to live without fear of judgment for being who we are. Let us continue to advocate for nothing about us without us, ensuring that representation remains at the heart of our collective effort in building a more inclusive and compassionate society. Ultimately, representation matters because our neurodivergent community has the right to thrive, not only survive. Survival is the bare minimum, and we deserve better. And I'll just say that I will pop a link to Sarah's social media into the chat just after this. Okay.
Thank you, Gillian, once again for reading something out for us. And more importantly, thank you, Sarah, for contributing not only that wonderful piece, but for all the work she does with the Neuro Pride community group. Sarah was the one that wrote all those lovely sample tweets that got sent out in our media pack of if people wanted to post something but didn't know what to post. You have Sarah to thank for those lovely tweets. And if you've joined the Facebook group in the last while, chances are Sarah was the one that let you into it. So thank you so much. And I would like to go back to Vic now.
Isn't it not unusual that a white male presenting person is going to take up even more space in a group? But thank you, because I forgot to say something, and this is important because it's call out to artists and photographers and who are neurodivergent and who you might know, who might be here or not here. Jeremy Andrew Davis is an autistic content creator who did an experiment with what we tend to call AI, but is actually just machine learning tools. These are the AIs that people are using to generate images, generate text, you know, those kind of AIs where people are like, we don't want to actually pay a creative person to create an image for us or do a photograph or write a piece of text. We're going to use this tool to do it instead, and then, you know, it's cheaper. Capitalism. But Jeremy Andrew Davis did an experiment. He asked a tool 148 times to generate an image for him with the keywords photorealistic, photojournalism, autistic person. And out of those 148 images, 148 were white, 0 were Black, Indigenous, or other people of color. 2 were women, and 5 were old. 80% of them had red hair. Most of them were skinny, and most of them looked sad. And that's what the AI generated. And it generated that because that is the perception that is most popular, because all those tools do is they go out into the world and they pull back what they believe to be the most popular or most common image. And they spew it out. They mash it up a bit and spew it out again. And it means it's up to artists and photographers and us to put more images out there and to popularize images and to push images that actually represent us. Because those tools are not going to go away unless I find someone who can program something that will destroy all of them, but that's a separate discussion. Can we turn off the recording while I ask around it? But those tools are not going to go away. So we have to also think about that when we're talking about the fight for representation, when we're talking about our future and what it will look like, is making sure that the images that we produce and that our friends produce and that our allies produce and our accomplices produce are actually representative and diverse. Because at the moment, 148 images, 2 women, 5 older, 0 BIPOCs. That's not good enough. And I forgot to say that because I have OCD, and even though it was right here on my notes, I didn't see it. And thank you very, very much for giving me the opportunity to jump back in. And now I will stop being a white male presenting person and shut my mouth.
Thank you so much. It is very important point. And I will say, if anybody would like to see some wonderful art by neurodivergent people, we have a creative corner on our website and also an Instagram where we are working on, it's a slow process, but we're working on making getting all them up on our Instagram as well as over in our creative corner on our website. But yes, thank you all so much to every speaker that has spoken. We've had some amazing topics, and I am very grateful to all of you for taking the time, and I am going to say a little piece myself, if that's okay with y'all, but I'm not gonna lie, anybody who has seen me speak before has seen me speak from a lovely pre-worded speech. That is not today. It's been a long week, but here we go. I myself am neurodivergent, and to be honest, I tend to just say I'm neurodivergent because it's one of the reasons we set up Neuro Pride. How do you divide out those parts if you're multiply neurodivergent? And how many of us are singularly neurodivergent? If I was to divide them out, for what I'm diagnosed as anxiety, depression, borderline personality disorder, CPTSD, PTSD, migraines, autistic, intracranial hypertension, also known as pseudocranial tumor, and my more recently learned one is OCD. Turns out I was diagnosed 10 years ago with it, but nobody informed me. But here's the thing. When we were creating Neuro Pride, we did have that conversation. It started as Autistic Pride. I'm not going to lie to you. It did start as Autistic Pride. It lasted as Autistic Pride for about 15 minutes before we realized, nah, this isn't going to work. Before we had even made any graphics or anything, we had a few of us had been invited to, I'm going to give you a very brief history of Neuro Pride here, and it is important to what I'm about to say. A few of us had been invited to speak at an Autistic Pride event back in 2021. We had set up we had recorded our videos, all this jazz, because that was the time of 100% online stuff. And the day before the event, they announced their keynote speaker. Their keynote speaker was a very problematic speaker that none of us wanted to be associated with. So for some reason, I took on the job of compiling all these videos, and within 24 hours, we produced the first Autistic Pride Ireland event in that format. We had lovely videos. The videos are all still available online. If you search Autistic Pride Ireland 2021, you'll still find all the videos on YouTube. And following that, we were all, a few of us stayed on, and we were talking, and we were like, let's do a proper Autistic Pride ourselves. And as I say, 15 minutes later, we were like, nah, let's do a Neuro Pride. And by the time we'd gotten off that Zoom call, we had a Facebook page made. That's how quick we were to it. For me personally, for neurodivergent pride, it was very important for loads of us to be able to recognize all these different parts of us. For me, it was more than that. It was knowing that I could walk into this space and show all the different parts of me. So while I was in loads of different autistic groups, and no shade to the ADHDers, but the ADHDers could talk about, oh, I'm autistic and ADHD, and talk about some of their more ADHD tendencies. The criticism that surrounded those of us with more traditionally considered mental illnesses was scary. I spent so much of my time debating whether it was worthwhile saying I was depressed or saying I was anxious. And when you saw the casual ableism that surrounded cluster B, it just admitting I was borderline personality difference was a no-go, until I get annoyed that people are being ableist, and then I'm trying to defend, because I will do anything to defend other people. But so that's what Neuro Pride was so important to me, that this is a space that regardless of your neurodivergency, you got to show up as you are. We will not tolerate discrimination against any neurodivergency. We will not allow people to use the casual ableism that is so often put towards our mad siblings. We will not tolerate it. And that was so important to me. And I know it was important to the rest of the team. And don't get me wrong, I'm just speaking on behalf of myself at the moment. But sorry, train of thought lost there for a sec. But this is why Neuro Pride, we try so hard to hear as many voices as possible. Are we doing it perfectly? No. Room for improvement? Of course. However, we will acknowledge that the main team is made of very few people, and we all have our own jobs, our own lives, our own neurodivergencies and disabilities to contend with. And so one of my favorite artists, the latest Kate, does lovely web comics about anxiety and depression and stuff. And she has one that I've had pinned to the wall of my phone at the moment. And it's about celebrate your current achievements. Don't just milk the goalpost. Because I know all of us are guilty of it. And while I can sit here and be like, we ran so many events, my mind is already thinking of how we can do it better. And I want to take this moment to thank you all for helping to make this community what it is, the inclusivity of it, the place where I can say, I have borderline personality difference, I am OCD or all this stuff, and I feel relatively safe. Not gonna lie, there's always that fear, and that's not on you, that's on society as a whole, because we can talk about Neuro Pride and we can talk about wanting everybody to be themselves, but for some of us, it's just not safe. Some of us, we don't get me wrong, we are all marginalized. I am not for one second doubting the struggles we all have. But if you have a diagnosis like BPD and you have children, TUSLA can start investigating you. It takes very little. If you have a diagnosis like NPD, narcissistic personality difference, you can immediately be disregarded for jury duty. The barriers that are placed in our system against those of us with mental health diagnosis is high. The risk is high, the rejection is high, and the abuse is high. So for every single person who is brave enough to say, I have OCD, I am a plural system, I I commend you and I appreciate, because we know the risks and we are helping normalize it for others coming behind us. But I want us all to remember, leaving this today, Neuro Pride is for every day and every single one of us, whether or not we are out, whether or not we feel happy in ourselves. This is not my superpower. This is my lived experience. And some days are hard, and I am just as worthy as Pride as somebody who feels happy every single day. Thank you all.
Thank you and good night. Oh, I'm back again.
Yes, we're back at 8 o'clock, though I will very kindly, actually I have to stop the recording and the fireside plug. To all yous watching over on Facebook and future people watching on YouTube and stuff, thank you so much for joining us.